I think the hope is that the resolution in Gaza will be so unequivocal, so clear, and so crushing to Israel's enemies as to constitute the kind of deterrent that we saw against Hezbollah itself with what was undoubtedly their defeat in 2006. Something I think that the Olmert government doesn't get much credit for, but which we see was true. They have been deterred since then. The idea, I think, is to deter Hezbollah once more without taking on Hezbollah by means of Hamas.
Yeah.
But that, of course, entails the optimistic idea of finishing off Hamas. And I have to say, we've been talking about what's happening on the ground in Gaza. I'm not that surprised they were able to bisect the strip. I'm not that surprised they were able to bomb many thousands of buildings. And I'm saddened to see that the civilian casualties are apparently as high as they are. None of that's a big surprise. What would have been a big surprise, or would have been a pleasant surprise after a month almost of all this, is if they were already in Gaza City, clearing it out of remaining nests of terrorists and trapping them all in the tunnels. That hasn't happened. So on the one hand, yes, they're being cautious, and we can laud them for that. This is not a reckless operation. But on the other hand, that caution entails a prolonged time span. And because of the civilian casualties, I think the pressure on Israel will eventually grow to end it. And from Israel's perspective, that could happen prematurely.
Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, wants to arrive here in Israel, wasn't so happy about it being published before it was actually finalized, but it would mean more than just this visit. It will fully complete this illustration of the new axes of good and axes of evil.
I do think so. Israel had, for its own reasons, equivocated on the issue of Russia and Ukraine, and upset Zelensky at the time, no little. For him to come here would be very useful for Israel because he is currently somewhere between Gandhi and Jesus Christ on a global respect scale. And it would show that Israel is not as isolated as some fear. And of course, he has a lot to gain. He wants to be very much not threatened in terms of the U.S. focus and aid by what's happening in Israel. So I think the ensuring that Ukraine and the effort to aid Ukraine will not be in any way harmed or diminished is implicitly part of what he's getting in exchange for coming here in line with Israel.
I have a feeling, and I will stand corrected if you correct me, gentlemen, that Erdogan is quite disappointed that he's not playing a more significant role in what's unfolding.
I think President Erdogan is playing a double game, and he's trying to not to emphasize how much he helped Hamas during the years. And I think this is why he's talking in a very strong language, but he's not really helping.
It's not really part of the game.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes on a world stage, not everyone is a rational player.
Yeah.
I mean, Turkey has a major trade surplus with Israel. They have a lot of interest in keeping Israel happy.
And Erdogan himself was on a crusade recently to mend defenses with
He was, and here's an opportunity for them to also please the West, which they haven't done so much of in recent times, trying to block the expansion of NATO and playing games with Russia, Ukraine. And instead, his inner Erdogan got the better of him, and it's kind of sad to see.
They prepared a certain amount of rockets, so as the pressure increases, they will be able to extend their ability to launch rockets until the last moment. It means the ceasefire that they expect that, I don't know, there will be a day that the ceasefire will be there. I think they think that this is another operation, okay? That's why they planned it like that. We are talking about a war. This is something totally different that they did not expect.
And we hear Israeli officials talking about it, that some sort of a pause or a ceasefire will be facilitated only if hostages are released. It's not we will pause and then consider talking. Only if we will see things happening on the ground will we see any major humanitarian relief in the form of a ceasefire.
For the North. For the South, I think, is a different equation of Gaza. Yeah, I agree with Grisha completely. Hamas may have miscalculated. They may not have realized that what they did on October 7th constituted an end of the discussion. about Israel's willingness to tolerate their presence in Gaza. They may be thinking that if they prolong the war and one day end the rockets, Israel will agree to a ceasefire. And I think from the Israeli perspective, if that happens, it is an unbearable defeat. I think Israel will take very drastic steps to prevent that from happening, because there is, in what is otherwise a very divided society in Israel at this point, pretty close to consensus that the idea that an organization like Hamas can be tolerated on Israel's borders has been obliterated. And I think anyone who's talking to Hamas, like maybe Qatar, might want to inform them. I'm not sure they know.
I think for the last few years there's been this big disconnect between Jews in Israel and the Jewish world, and even on that, the amount of support we are getting from Jewish communities around the world is so important. And I know that many of the people watching this in English are people who live abroad. Please know this means so much to us, and this is an opportunity obviously for Israeli society to heal, but it's also an opportunity for the Jewish world to heal and to continue our incredible story that's 3,500 years old.
Is the Israeli discourse going to change for real, Dan Perry?
You know, a rabbi friend of mine told me today that this is a story of the Jewish people, out of darkness, light.
Right.
I think so. You know, we spend so much time on television talking about all the iniquities in Israel and the divisions, and you mentioned something about the Jews and how we feel the support from Jews abroad. I think that is very true, and that is sort of a correction to events of the recent years when maybe because of certain skullduggeries being done in Israel, there was a sense of a rupture. And I'm sort of hoping that after all this is done, there can really be a healing where the various radical elements of Israel sort of hold their fire and understand that the golden mean and the way of the center and the way of reaching out may be a better idea, both within Israeli society as well as to the world in general, to the Jewish world, and I have to say also the Palestinians. I mean, I said earlier on the show, October 7th put paid to certain ideas that have been revealed to be dangerous and unsustainable, like that there can be a terrorist militia on the borders, and that it's kind of okay to have them indoctrinate the youth with absolute anti-Semitism for about 20 years. And I'm a little bit guilty of that myself when I was a foreign correspondent, of maybe not paying quite enough attention to how dangerous it is to allow not just the Hamas-run Gaza Strip, but also the textbooks and the PA and all the rest of it. All that has to end.
And this is why we've heard the use of the term denazification.
Sure, and it's a shame because
it took years.
That the term has been sort of discredited by nonsensical use by Putin, and you want to be careful to compare anyone to the Nazis, obviously, but it's not crazy to use such a term about what has been going on in the educational system of the Palestinian side. But alongside all of this, October 7th also, I think, exposed the fallacy of a notion that had set in Israel, which is that the Palestinians can be ignored. They clearly cannot. And some reasonable, equitable, fair, but careful solution to that 100-year conflict, I think, may be closer today than it was on October 6th.